What is there to say about Kurt Cobain that no one hasn't already? What is there that hasn't been written in a million ways, in a million articles, in a million songs?
My mouth fell open, hoping that the truth would not be true. Refuse the news.
It's redundant to talk about how great Nirvana was. They're a band that's so ingrained in our culture that you don't even see the strings they still pull 20 years later. They're that moment in pop culture that should have never happened, and yet had to happen. But again, all of this has been said better by someone else.
What else should I say?
So, if there's nothing else to add about him, what about the conversation itself? What has been said about Kurt? How do we reflect on him? Not as a figure, not as a rock star. How have we portrayed Kurt through our media? This is a film called Last Days, directed by Gus Van Sant, and it's less a recreation of the days leading to Kurt's death and more of an interpretation. Gus has repeatedly denied that this is a direct biopic, going so far as to change his name to Blake, and well, that's about it. But most of the elements of Kurt are kept, such as his look, the circumstances around his death, and even his affinity for mac and cheese. So, how does Van Sant present Kurt to us? While we're never told much about him or what even drives him to suicide, Michael Pitt plays him as someone always moaning in pain, speaking to himself in self-deprecating tongues that are neither elaborated on nor discernible. In fact, Kurt is shown as someone who refuses any and all help that's presented to him.
No one's here. You can go. It'll be easy. If you stay here, you're just gonna...
Last Days is a film that subjugates us to everything Kurt does. And what does he do? Well, he eats some cereal, plays guitar, and hides from people.
Wait!
In fact, there are moments where someone will find him and do nothing. Or someone tries to talk to him,
And I was wondering if you could maybe help me figure it out a little.
only to be pulled aside. For the whole movie, we are a fly on the wall watching every mundane thing he does, even if it's nothing at all. Kurt's suicide in Last Days is not treated as a tragedy, but more of an inevitability. There's no one thing that sets him off, and if there is, we never find out what exactly. His end is as inevitable as the end of the film itself, and he's just biding his time until he eventually has to do it. It's still not a good movie, at all, but the take is interesting. But where Van Sant relishes in the abstract, others are more interested in the facts. Where he portrays Kurt as a martyr, others focus on him more as a victim. The difference being that a martyr has a legacy cut short. There's that sense of greatness to them, a talent gone too soon, or the voice of something greater than them. Whereas a victim is remembered for their death, and just that. Which leads us to two other unremarkable gems, Kurt and Courtney and Soaked in Bleach. To give you a brief summary, one is a lazy TMZ expose on his relationship with Courtney Love by an ambulance chaser to the stars, and the other is an informative murder porn special that should have aired on ID Discovery.
I knocked for at least 5 minutes. If he's there, he would have answered.
All right. We just don't want to end up on the wrong end of a shotgun.
Kurt and Courtney was the first film to be made in the wake of his death, and also the first to introduce the theory that Courtney Love had him killed. This would be an interesting subject in the hands of someone who actually gives a shit.
Kurt was like a folk hero, a god in his own right. He popularized punk rock and experienced incredible success.
That's right, folks. The guy making a movie about Kurt Cobain doesn't know what grunge is. But where Kurt and Courtney is more concerned with having you pay attention to Nick Broomfield trying to make a movie,
It's also a story that some people have not wanted told, and the various attempts to control the journalists, writers, filmmakers that have tried to tell it. It was around this stage that the financing began to drop out of the film. This control, I discovered, made even the financing of this film very difficult. My co-funders started to get pressure from Courtney's people to pull out. As I suspected, under pressure from Courtney's people, our co-funders pulled out.
We'll have to be like stalkerazzi, as I like to call these people. We'll have to sit there, wait till she comes out one morning. They're there for 6 hours a day.
Soaked in Bleach is the more focused counterpart that wants to tell its story with facts. Because, you know, that's kind of the point of a documentary. It wants to set the record straight on this conspiracy theory and introduce evidence and circumstances that the general public doesn't know about.
Seattle police reports indicate that Kurt Cobain was found with a shotgun upside down, with his left hand grasping the barrel in a vice-like grip known as a cadaveric spasm. Cadaveric spasm is a form of muscular stiffening that only occurs in death. This all seems straightforward, until you take into account the shotgun shell was found to Cobain's left side, opposite of where we'd expect to find the shell, on Cobain's right side. Seattle PD explained the illogical trajectory of the shotgun shell by concluding that the shotgun was fired right side up by Cobain. The shotgun flipped upside down, expelling the shell to his left, to finally rest in the position that it was found. This proposed scenario is impossible. In order for the scenario the Seattle police stated occurred, Cobain's wrist would have to bend at an angle that is anatomically impossible.
And while there are some fascinating points brought up, the problem with Soaked in Bleach is how one-sided it can feel. It never once sympathizes with Courtney or even plays devil's advocate with what it's talking about. At moments like these,
Courtney always wanted to go through Dylan. She wanted to talk to Dylan on the phone and have Dylan give me the instructions.
They never step back and go, oh yeah, she was also on a lot of drugs and under massive scrutiny by the press. Maybe that's why she was acting weird.
I didn't know at the time that this was supposed to be an in-house rehab. I learned that later, but total farce. I mean, most of the time I was with her, she was either on drugs or doing drugs. There was nobody overseeing what was going on there.
No, by this film's logic, heroin addicts are as equally liable as regular people. And going so far as to dispel any notions that Kurt was ever in his life suicidal.
I've never heard Kurt talk about suicide or anything. He's always seemed happy around me, you know, quiet, shy, but definitely happy. He never hinted to me that he was depressed.
Oh, and when they show you who they got to play Kurt, yeah. It's like they got the Winter Soldier to look like Taylor Hawkins. Like, really, what the hell is this? The overall problem with both of these films is that they carry an agenda, neither of which feel like noble ones at that. Their treatment of Kurt himself feel hollow, and at a point, it seems like they forget the most important part about him, the way we remember him the most, as an artist. Montage of Heck understands how Kurt is viewed in the public eye, and rather than regurgitate what's already been said, it instead wants to recontextualize him as a person. With Kurt's audio diaries to guide the narrative, we're able to see a side of him we don't often get, and only using on-camera interviews to enhance the perspective. But director Brett Morgan limits these to as few people as possible so it doesn't become sensationalized or convoluted. They never mention his influence or acclaim and instead opt to treat his success no different in the story than his first suicide attempt.
Pot didn't help me escape my troubles too well anymore, and I was actually enjoying doing rebellious things like stealing booze and busting store windows, and nothing ever mattered. I decided within the next month I'll not sit on my roof and think about jumping, but I'll actually kill myself. And I wasn't going out of this world without actually knowing what it was like to get laid. I got grossed out very heavily with how her vagina smelled and her sweat reeked, so I left. And so during lunch, a rumor started, and by the next day, everyone was waiting for me to yell and cuss and spit at me, calling me the retard fucker. I walked down to the train tracks and laid down and put 2 big pieces of cement on my chest and legs, and I waited for the 11 o'clock train. And the train came closer and closer and closer, and it went on the next track besides me, instead of over me.
Montage of Heck strives for that balance between Kurt the artist and Kurt the person, to make the most personal biography they can, which leads me to a discerning question. Is it justifiable how we've reflected on him? In trying to pay tribute to him, where does that line exist? Have we lamented or exploited his life? Does our appreciation of his music make up for us violating his privacy, to where we take his own private recordings and weave together a film to show the world? To us turning his journals into a New York Times bestseller, taking demos meant for his own amusement only to cash in on them for his name alone? Have we, as twisted as it may sound, justified how he reacted? I have one more film I'd like to share. It's a 2006 documentary called Kurt Cobain, about a son. It's a film more stylistically in vein of, say, Koyaanisqatsi, in that there are no on-screen interviews. It is instead comprised of recorded conversations between him and Michael Azerrad while he was working on his biography, Nirvana, Come As You Are.
What was that like hearing that song come on the radio?
It was amazing. I never thought that I'd ever get to that point. You know, I just thought I would be in a band and maybe make a demo, but for them to play it on the radio was just too much to ask for at that time.
It's insightful without feeling intrusive, beautiful in all the right places, and dark where it needs to be.
People are constantly accusing me of being in a bad mood and always asking me, what's the matter? And there's nothing wrong with me at all. I'm not feeling blue at all. I don't know. It got to the point where I actually had to look at myself and maybe figure out what people are seeing. And I thought maybe I should shave my eyebrows. That might help, you know?
About a Son doesn't treat him like a rock star or a martyr or a victim. It treats him like a friend. Someone you wish you could call again, not because he was famous, but because of just how relatable he was. And that's how I like to remember Kurt. Someone relatable.